So let's just start with the streak. I mean, I know you probably get this every single time people talk to you, but December 1964, here we are in April 2012. You've run every day? Is that true or false?
Yeah, the streak, the last time I missed a day of running was December the 20th, 1964. And what people don't realise that I ran once on December the 21st, and on December the 22nd I started another streak, which was to run twice a day and once on Sundays, and I kept that going for 26.2 years. Now, why 26.2?
I'm sure there's a mileage significance in that somewhere.
I was running one day. I'd run probably 4 miles in the morning, and I was on a 9-mile run at lunchtime, and I just felt knackered, if you excuse the word, and I thought, this twice a day is not really doing me any good. I've got to start running once a day occasionally. And I said, well, where can we end this? You know, I've been over 26 years, and I hate odd numbers. Like, I could go to the end of the year and that'll be 27 years. I said, I must find something more significant. And it just came to me, 26.2 years, 26.2 miles to the marathon. And then calculations started in my head. Whoopee, there's only about 2 weeks to go. And I thought I would just miss occasionally and go one day occasionally, but very quickly it dropped down to once a day, and that was it. And that's one reason why I'll not take a day off, because I know if I do, it'll become more than one day probably, and it might just sort of destroy me, if you will.
I do think it's an amazing round. I think it's worth another round of applause, don't you? What is it about running, Ron, that's had you in its grip for such a long time now? What is it about the sport that makes you want to do that every morning?
Well, initially I wanted to be the best that I could. And so, you know, I developed, when I went to university in 1957, I started to run twice a day. It's like 3 miles in the morning, 7 miles in the evening. And it took me a long time to get anywhere. I got into my first marathon, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, was 1961. So that's 51 years ago, is it? And it was the Liverpool City Marathon. There's been a new one this last year, and I was at the launch of that. And I said, well, you know, all those years ago, it was a big city marathon. It started at St George's Hall and ran around the outskirts of Liverpool and finished on Anfield in front of a capacity football crowd, a pre-season match. There were 50 entrants, I think it was, and 38 starters. Can you imagine that? 38 people lining up for a marathon of that stature. And all 38 finished, and to cut a long story short, at 10 miles I was thinking, why are people going so slowly? Why I ran that marathon was because by 1961 I was an avid racer. I had to race every weekend, and that one weekend in August of 1961 I couldn't find anything else on the calendar but the Liverpool Marathon. So I thought, okay, let's have a go at the Liverpool Marathon. I'd never raced further than 16 miles before, and I had, as I said, 10 miles and I'm thinking, why is it so slow? And gradually 2 of us pulled away, myself and the ghost runner John Tarrant, and he was leading me for a long way, and I'm just sitting in behind him because he was the master, he was the course record holder. And his coach was a guy called Joe Lancaster, himself a former world record holder. And he'd come alongside in a car and said to, bloody hell, John, don't do all the donkey work. And Tarrant almost stopped dead, and I nearly fell over him. So I took over for a little while, then he went ahead again. And at 22, coming to a railway bridge, he put in a surge, and I went with him. And he sort of slowed at the top, so I said, right, I'm off. So I went on to win that in 2:24.22. I'll not tell you what it felt like after the race. I mean, everybody's experienced this. I was never going to do another one. Until in those days, the newspapers used to give running, you know, a big section and a big following. In Monday's Manchester Guardian, there was like, you know, quarter of a page on me winning the Liverpool Marathon and what a prospect I was, and you know, from like saying never again, my chest started to swell up. Maybe I'll have another go. And I did, actually somebody reminded me of this, it's the Queen's Jubilee year. In 1962, my second marathon was the Polymarathon, which starts up in Windsor Castle. The Queen actually started the race that day. And I didn't think I'd met John Tarrant again after that first Liverpool Marathon, but I've looked in my own autobiography, and there's a picture of me and Tarrant racing again. But I went on to win that one, thank God, and I beat my personal best and ran 2:21, so that's how I became a marathon runner.
It is a little known fact, isn't it, that the Queen started that race, but she pulled out after 7 miles with a hip injury. So first race is in 61. It only takes you 8 years. I say 8 years in running, that's a lifetime for some of us, but it takes you 8 years to really fulfill your potential and to take on, at that time, sort of superstardom status with your win in the European Championships and the Commonwealth Games. 69-70 must have been a magical time for you.
It was, and I'm quite surprised to look at that period, because in 1964 I broke the world record for the marathon. I ran 2:14:12. The unfortunate thing is there was a guy just in front of me called Basil Heatley, and he ran 2:13:55. So he had the official world record, but I'd run the world record. The world record then was held by Buddy Edelin, who sadly passed away. And I ran 2:14:12. It was only in 1969, when I went to the first Manchester Maxall Marathon, that I actually beat that time. And I also beat the so-called world record holder Derek Clayton into second place by 2 minutes. I ran 2:13:42. When I look back, I've only improved half a minute in 5 years. But that beating Clayton and winning that race was the stepping stone. I think that gave me the confidence. And every race after that, I grew in confidence. I got invited to Fukuoka and ran 2:11 for that race. And again, not carrying a watch, not understanding the metric splits. Got to the finish and somebody said, "Oh, you ran 2:11:54." I just thought, where does that come from? That's 2 minutes better than, over 2 minutes better than my best. And coming away from Athens, which was really one of the biggest and happiest days of my life, finishing in that old stadium and only taking the lead with one kilometre to go. Coming out of the stadium, a man from the Roadrunners Club came up to me, and this is the way things were in those days. He said, "I say, Hill, how would you like to go to the Boston Marathon?" I'd love to, because no Briton had ever won it. I didn't think I could win it, but it was a trip to the Boston Marathon, brilliant. So the Roadrunners Club had a whip round, they had a fund, and raised the money for my airfare. When I got there, the race director, Jock Sample, put me up with a family in a place called Winchester, miles away, but it suited me. I did my training, and again, on a horrible, wet, headwind day, and I'd only take my string vest with me. I was freezing. I had a battle with the guy who'd beaten me in Fukuoka, a guy called Jerome Drayton, and I dropped him once at about 7 miles. He came back. I said a few words to him, which I think put him off a bit, and at 10 miles he dropped out. So I went on and was proud for the first Briton to win the Boston Marathon and the first Briton. And somebody came up and said, "Oh, by the way, you just ran 2:10:30. Again, I had no watch, and the splits in Boston in those days were like 7.6, 10.2. I had no idea what pace I was running. I just wanted to win. And again, I thought, where's that come from? But I mean, again, that was another lift in confidence, and that's when I went on about 3 months later and ran 2:9:28 in the Commonwealth Games at Edinburgh. So that's my major career over in a year.
We all remember the string vest. It was one of your calling cards, was it not? But I'm just looking down at the times that you're mentioning there, and I have to say they're all right to the second. Ron's recall is just extraordinary. But is that because every marathon is such an important part of your life? I mean, yes, I know we'll have people doing it tomorrow, and they'll jog their way around in 4 or 5 hours, and the very best of luck to them. But at an elite level, it's rather like listening to golfers after they finished a round of golf. They can remember every shot they've hit on every single hole. You seem to have an extraordinary recall for every major marathon that you've ever raced. Is that because it has such a massive impact on your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, I trained really hard to be the best that I could, and I think, in fact, when I ran the 209 in Edinburgh, I remember a steeplechase called Andy Holden standing at the bottom on the Portobello Road, and it was like a 2-mile climb to the stadium, and he's shouting, "Go for the world record, go for the world record," and I just said to myself, forget the world record, I just want to get to the finish, because the job today is to win the Commonwealth Games, forget times, to win the Commonwealth Games for myself and for England. And I was certain that after that I could go a lot faster. But I mean, things were against me, like my old pal Alf Tupper, the officials and stuff like that, people at work. I mean, my salary was held back because I took time off to run for England and Britain. And not long after that, after I'd been to the Commonwealth Games in Christchurch, my manager asked me into the office and said, "Oh, by the way, we've got this decision from higher up that from now on, if you want to run for Britain or England, you've got to take your annual leave." I said, "Hello, I think I might be off here soon." And so I never got really the time to fulfill my potential. But I always had two sayings in my running, well, in my life. In running, never leave a stone unturned in your quest to be the best. In other words, research diet, look at your training logs, see what suits you. Everything I did was down to be the best that I could. And the other saying that I had was, I never want to look back when I'm past my best and say, "Oh, if only I'd done this." And I can say I tried everything.
Do you look at the sport nowadays and think, "I wish I could have my time again"? We were talking with Richard Narurka and Hugh Jones a moment ago about the amount of investment in the sport now and the way that the athletes are looked after by their governing bodies, by their agents, by their sponsors. Would you fancy a crack in your peak at 2012?
I can't speculate, to be honest with you. It's silly to look back and as I say, if only I did all that I could in my era. I can only think that what if we got, what if I lived at altitude for so many months of the year? What if I had massage? I've only ever had 2 massages in my life. One was on holiday with Mercury Direct in Sri Lanka, and the other was before the Enschede Marathon. I think it was 1975. I had a 15-minute massage before the race and broke the course record. So I've been thinking, what if I could have had that on a regular basis? No medical backup. We hadn't got the money to go to specialists and stuff like that. So you do look back and think, if times had been different, I think I could have gone a bit faster, but they weren't different.
How did you fit your training schedule around your full-time career?
Dead easy. I knew I had to run twice a day, and when I graduated from Manchester University, we went to live in a flat in Fallowfield in Manchester, and I got a job, and that was I knew where the job was going to be, the place called Droylsden in the Manchester area. And a guy called Jack Davis, who was the treasurer of the English Cross Country Union in those days, I got on very well with him and knew his family well. And he said, "Look, if you want to buy a house, Ron, I'll lend you the deposit." So we found a house at £2,250. Imagine that, a full house. So he lent me the 225 quid, which was 10% deposit. But before I bought that house, what I did was to get an owner's survey map and get a compass with a 5-mile sort of radius and drew a big circle around this place in Droylsden. And I said to myself, right, we start looking for a house now, it's got to be on that line. And I got right on the line because I knew I couldn't run straight to work. And by the time I'd done all the diversions, it turned out to be 7.5 miles, something like that. So I ran every morning. I get up early and run at 7 o'clock in the dark, in winter obviously.
And summer in Manchester.
Well, no, come on. It's not that bad. And so I run to work and back run Friday lunchtime, come home. Races were on Saturday in those days. Whatever, no matter what the race, I'd run 5 miles in the morning, race in the afternoon, and do 20.5 miles on Sunday. So that was the regime, and it fitted really well. I mean, I was home by 6:15 every night, and training finished. You know, it's good. It's easy that way.
Favourite marathon? Is it possible to pick one? I mean, you mentioned you went to Boston and won that as the first Britain to do so. You won the European champs on that marathon to Athens course. You went representing England and won in Scotland. Is there something that sticks out amongst those major races, or perhaps something even smaller that has sentimental value to you?
Those 3 victories, Athens, Boston and Edinburgh, obviously to be successful and to break records like that will always be my favourite races. But beyond that, I mean, I used to, when you've travelled to the Olympics, and which were in Tokyo one time, then Mexico City, you get a taste for travel, I must admit. And I once got invited to go to a race called the Maryland Marathon in Baltimore, and all I got was my airfare. But I mean, I thought, well, it's worth going there for a marathon, because I can, marathons I can just take them as they come, doesn't really matter. And I think I went over there and ran 2:17 on a course that included a 1 in 5 hill at 18 miles. It was called Sater Hill. That was a killer. It was out and back. And I ended up going there 9 times, and I got 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and nearly got the full set. So I really enjoyed going there, just to be in America and just to see the different way of life. So that obviously has to be a bit of a favourite, because that's the one I went to most.
Ron, it's been fascinating talking to you. We've only got 5 minutes left. Has anybody got any questions from the audience that they'd like to ask? Yes?
So what was the question again?
How many have you actually run?
Oh, I've officially run 115, and 100.
Last week, wasn't it?
It was the 100th Boston. I can tell you exactly when it was. It was the 100th Boston in 1996, and I hadn't run a marathon for 5 years then. What happened was I ran a couple of Londons and ran 2:51. That was outside my bar was at 2:50, and not only were they 2:51, but they hurt me. I was hurting, people were passing me, and I'm going. In the end, I just thought, what the hell am I doing this for? It's just crazy. You've run 2:9 and you're struggling at 2:51. So my body was saying, it's about time you gave it a rest, really. But I've run a few, and I don't know how many called phantom marathons, where I'd be invited to run with somebody, and it was going to be outside 2:50. And I'd stopped before the line, so I wasn't on the official list or anything, so I'd probably done 120, I would guess. But I think when you run them at a certain intensity, it seems they can take it out on your body.
I'm sure I was exhausted walking from the hotel to here. Anybody else got a question for Ron?
Don't be shy, I've got all day.
Well, I've got to ask you, Ron. I mean, obviously, speaking to you earlier, as you know, I run every day just like you, but I'm a novice. I'm in my 5th year. But I'm amazed that nobody in this country has ever set up a run streak club. You're the master, you're the legend. I don't know anybody who's run every day longer than you as a human being. Can anybody answer that question? Is there anybody else? Why is there not a run streak club in the UK?
I don't know.
I'm surprised nobody's approached you to do this.
A bloke wrote to Athletics Weekly last week and said, it's not very nice leaving Ron Hill out of the Olympic torch relay, and he signed off saying 11 years of continuous running. He's a guy from Hercules in Wimbledon. So maybe, I don't know, it's a good idea. Maybe there's some guys out there who've been running for 25 years and never missed.
There's loads, but what I'm saying is, Ron, I'm surprised that you don't know of anybody that's, obviously, I can't imagine anybody running longer than you every day. There mustn't be, otherwise you'd know about them, wouldn't you?
I think so,
You can't find them on a website or anything, because I've searched these US sites and everything.
Well, this book I mentioned, Running Crazy, says that the first guy to run 100 marathons ran it in 1987. Well, I did my 100th on the Athens course in 1985, so I'm in front of him for a start.
one to check out then, I think.
Yeah.
Ron is going to be back with us at 2:30. I'll be asking him 3 more questions, and he'll be filling another half an hour for us, which will be great. It's been absolutely spectacular listening to somebody who I remember running when I was not even interested in the sport, but you caught my attention, particularly in that white string vest. But to sit next to you and listen to you talk so eloquently about your career has been absolutely marvellous. If you want to hear on again at 2:30, next with us will be John Tracy, and that will be in around about 5 minutes' time. Let's hear it for Ron Hill.